So welcome to Melissa and Tony, and thanks so much for generously sharing your time and knowledge with us about online ticketing. So Tony, I think it would be great just to hear a little bit about Brisbane Jazz Club.
Right, okay. Brisbane Jazz Club has been at the forefront of presenting jazz for 43 years now, so we have a long history. We are a not-for-profit organisation run essentially by volunteers. We have a committee of volunteers made up of volunteers and lots of other volunteers that come in each night. We're open to help out, do lots of things around the club. We do have some paid staff. We have paid front of house staff and paid bar staff, but most of what is done purely on a voluntary basis. The club has grown a great deal over the 43 years that it's been in existence, and we are now open and present live concerts for at least 4 nights a week, and occasionally other nights and some lunchtimes. And we also run once a month a club night just to get our members coming in and possibly have a bit of a jam session, as jazz clubs like to do. And but basically we like to see ourselves at the forefront of presenting this sort of jazz. We have a small clubhouse which we have occupied the same building for that same 43 years. The building itself has been improved a great deal over the period and is now a very comfortable small venue. We can comfortably seat around 120 people on the inside of the club. We also have a large outside area overlooking the Brisbane River, which is very attractive. And we also have room for people to come in and stand around, or occasionally people dancing as well, but not so much room for that these days. So in a nutshell, that's really what Brisbane Jazz Club is.
Great,
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
And I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about your motivations and your decision really to introduce online ticketing into your ticketing environment.
So I might take that one because the decision to go to online ticketing happened during the time that I was the president there, which is 2004 to 2007. And it's probably good to explain the way that things used to happen. So as a small volunteer committee, the way that we used to take bookings was that we had a phone number at the club, sometimes people's home phone numbers. And if you wanted to make a booking at the club, you had to either phone and hope that someone was there, or leave a message and hope that someone got back to you, or you'd have to be in at the club and speak to someone at the front of house. And as you can imagine, that was a really time-consuming task, because it meant that people had to be there to answer the phone, or they had to listen to a message and then get back to a person. So a lot of time was actually spent on ticketing, and as you can imagine, human error would also say that sometimes a message would get missed, and sometimes someone had come into the front of house on a night and someone had written it down on a piece of paper. So the systems there, although not too bad, were certainly not effective. So once we started to look at the options, sort of the idea that people could actually purchase their tickets when they wanted to, and we not have to have manpower to actually do that, was quite attractive. So I think that was the initial motivation to go that way, which was to try and free up some of this time, which we knew could be put to better use, basically. And I guess maybe that kind of leads on to the sort of testing, or maybe the overall time that it took to implement that system. I would say realistically it was at least, to test it properly took at least 6 months to see whether it was working. But it's an ongoing kind of process of this online ticketing. So at the beginning we didn't have a seating map as such, but as we went on we realised that a seating map was really important so that people could actually choose their seats. We integrated our membership database into the ticketing system. So it definitely was a process that needed a great deal of testing. You could never just do it once and go, oh, okay, maybe only 10 people booked that time. We had to test it. So,
okay, great. So you said it took you about 6 months to sort of scope the systems. How did you choose the right platform for the Jazz Club, Tony?
Okay, we looked around at a number of systems that were available. Just did the usual Google and had a look to see what was there. At that time, there wasn't a lot of options. There was very few people actually doing it. I think now that's changed and there's several more people got established in that area. But the system we choose, the Sabo system, in the end came up not necessarily the cheapest system to have, but it seemed to be the most one suited to our type of operation. A lot of the online ticketing were people like Qtix and so forth, who really are designed to handle very large venues, whereas the system we chose was designed specifically for smaller venues and proved to work very well for those smaller venues. So it took quite a lot of looking around at different people, but in the end, as I say, we opted for that particular system because it gave us what we were looking for and enough feedback to help us adjust the system where we felt we needed to. So it was a matter of, yes, cost was important, but more than that, it was the facilities that they were offering and the adaptability of those systems to suit our particular venue.
Great. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the cost, Tony, and what you've kind of invested.
Okay. Effectively, there's very little actual upfront cost. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was fairly nominal. The cost is much more in the charge per ticket that is made by the booking agent. That is one that gets built into our operation, and the actual cost works out at about, I think it's 90 cents per ticket, and then there's some banking costs on top of that. So it works out at effectively about $1 per ticket that we have to pay. But we had to guarantee a minimum number of ticket sales to be able to adopt the system. They obviously wanted to know they were going to get a given amount out of it. Initially that frightened us because the amount they wanted we thought sounded fairly a little bit above what we really would have thought we could do. And we had to be careful and evaluate that. But in the end we decided to give it a go. They were insistent that once the system was up and running, we would be surprised by the number of people that would book online and that we would have no trouble at all in making the budget that was set. And they proved to be absolutely right. It took very little time and we were very surprised about the number of people that did start booking online. Bearing in mind this was some years ago now where people weren't as used to booking online as they are today. And from memory, in the first year, we met the budget by doubled, I think, without too many problems. So that fear wasn't there. I guess for a very small venue, you would have to evaluate that fairly carefully. But as I say, there are a number of systems around these days in varying costs. So if anyone's looking to do it, they need to evaluate each one to suit their own particular organisation.
And in terms of administratively, how long would actually take you to build one event in your ticketing system, do you think?
It's quite fast, really. I think we have a front of house staff member who's a part-time staff member, and she looks after all of the lodging of the events online. But because it's in kind of a template form and it's just sort of part of that, weekly task. It's very fast. I would be surprised if it takes more than half an hour, to sort of enter.
And in actual fact, we do it monthly. All the performances for a month are put in pretty much in one go. So that it does take a little time to do that, but I would think about 4 to 6 hours to put in all the performances that we have, which is, let's say, is at least 4 a week.
Yeah, so it could be 16 to 20, couldn't it?
Easily, yes.
For a month. So,
yeah.
And I suppose, Melissa, from a committee point of view, when you did decide to go online, and what was the biggest challenge in taking maybe the committee on the journey, or perhaps your audience on the journey?
Yeah, look, it was definitely both, and I think the club at that time was undergoing a lot of changes. So this sort of the online ticketing was all wrapped up into this. Previously, the club it sort of had been very strong, but it hadn't necessarily regenerated its audiences. So there was quite a high percentage of older people sort of at the club. Once that sort of started to change up a little bit and the demographic became different, a lot of things changed. So within the committee and also within the membership, the thing to manage were the expectations of those existing members so the existing members who would come to the club, and also the management committee. And my strategy was always to test things and just go, okay, let's just see how this goes. Let's give it, a certain period of time, and let's try opening on Friday nights, for instance, because we'd never used to open on Friday nights. Let's try, something. And that was the same thing with the online ticketing, was to say, look, the possibilities of this, are really great. Even though people on the committee might not have said, was like, oh, well, I would never buy anything online. I don't give my credit card, to someone on the computer, because that sort of thing existed in some places. We had to convince people to, just test it really. It was just about being transparent about that process, I think. And also with our membership, once people realised that it was quite easy and safe to be able to book online, that just started to generate just so much more stability for the club itself, because when you know that you've got X number of people coming and they've paid for their tickets, that was another thing about taking a telephone call and yes, I'll put your booking down, is that if you haven't paid your money, well, it's kind of easy not to turn up. Once you've done your booking online, you've got that money there, you know that there's going to be people turning up. So like Tony said, it didn't take long to kind of show those results. But yes, to the initial shift to it, we had to just manage the expectations and help people through that process.
That was really one of the motivations in going for the system, was that, as Melissa said previously, they just had to phone in and reserve a seat. And we did find quite a lot of people would phone in and reserve a seat and not turn up. Whereas once we started doing it online and they had to pay up front for it, we rarely get anybody not coming. And so that has helped build audiences as well and safeguard our finances. So that worked as a very positive.
So at the moment, what would you say is your online booking percentage versus your people that rock up on the night and buy their tickets on the door?
Okay. It does vary from night to night, but probably 70 to 80% of people book, and then we get the others just walking in, And of those 70 to 80% that book, probably 95% book online. We still get a few people phone in, but very few now.
Okay. Yeah. Great. And if you, I suppose if you thought backwards when you introduced the system, what were you sort of looking at that time? When the first sort of year in, can you remember what your kind of audience numbers were booking online? I'm just trying to gather how the change has developed.
It definitely grew the longer we had the ticketing system up there, because, word of mouth and kind of audience sort of feeding itself says that once you've got people who start to book online and then they're going to rebook online, etc. So it definitely grew, I would say, from the first year.
Yeah.
But I don't know what the percentages would have been, but it definitely is. It's increased to the point where it's that 80% now.
What was very helpful was having good front of house staff, because when at first quite a lot of people would ring in and say they couldn't work the online system, but once they were talked through it once, then they were quite happy doing it afterwards. So it was a bit of a learning curve for everybody. Yeah. From that point of view.
How did you promote the online ticketing, the changeover? Was there any, did you use any sort of incentives to get people to start booking online, or?
I can't remember that we used any incentives to book online, but we certainly communicated a lot to the membership. We had a newsletter, still have a newsletter that goes out. At that point, it was still being posted, so we were really clear with the membership about sort of what was happening, and I guess that's just communicating about what was happening, and as Tony said, having someone there to help take people through it if they were uncertain of how to actually manage the system online. Yeah, of course, demographically, people who are, sort of using computers all the time, sort of, have less of a problem with it. But the Brisbane Jazz Club membership is such that we still, value our older members, and they might not have been at that point as comfortable. Mind you, everyone now has, I think even, 60, 70, 80-year-olds are so au fait with computers now that's less of an issue. At that time, though, we needed to have people to, take them through it.
So that's correct, yeah.
Yeah, so Tony, in terms of, it sounds like you had a membership database, and then as you introduced the online ticketing, you would be gathering more and more contact information and email addresses from new audience members.
That's correct, yes.
How have you started using that data now at the Brisbane Jazz Club?
Okay, well, a number of ways, and that collection of that data is very useful. We have a very large database of names which we use. We use that to send out a weekly e-blast showing what's coming up for the following week or so, and any other information we want to give to people. That works well and gets to a lot of people. And we can also collect information as to the sort of shows people like, the sort of genre of music that people particularly like. And it is possible to just aim specific marketing at those people. And also we can collect information which is useful to us. What we call the marketing codes, like when people book, they have to say, we ask them to say where they heard of the event, and we collect that information, and we found that very useful, and indeed has changed our marketing strategies because of the information that we've collected from that. Progressively we found over the period that people less and less read magazines or go for print advertising, and that internet advertising or promotion reaches a lot more people and works a lot better.
Great. Okay. What I think we might do now is, I think there might be a few questions that are coming through. If any of the participants would like to ask any of their own questions, feel free to type them in now. I can see a couple up on the screen. Yep. So Melissa, I might just throw to you and get you to answer some of those.
Question here is, can you make the ticketing platform look like your own? How do you maintain your branding with the system you use? I can talk to that one. Sabo's very good in the sense that it works in with your whatever your existing website platform is. So essentially, when people are on our site and they click through to the event, that's all Brisbane Jazz Club kind of branding. When it gets down into the kind of more nuts and bolts part of the ticketing system, we still have branding there, but it's much more sort of logistic Sabo interface.
Initially it all looks like Brisbane Jazz Club until you press the book now button, then it goes to the booking system, which still is sort of Jazz Club, but it's very much the same format that you would find for any venue that are using that particular system. It looks exactly the same. It is adaptable to a point, and you can put in your own sort of information you want to collect from it. It's reasonably easy to do all that sort of stuff. So it is, you're able to make it look more like your own and ask specific questions that we need to get the answers to.
Can I just ask you a question just on that? Do people receive an email with a ticket that they print, or do you have a door list, or how do you sort of manage that after?
They have an option on the booking form. A lot of people will print their own tickets and bring them in, or they can just come in, which we don't encourage a lot, or they can come in with their mobile phone with their ticket on their phone, which more and more people are now doing. So there are some options there, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. I think that answers that question. Next question, what if some of your patrons don't have access to the internet? How do you handle their bookings? And yes, we do still have a quantity of people who do phone up, or they'll come into the club during the office hour, during club office hours, so that they can do those transactions without having to have internet access, or they can call, doing it the old way, call and leave a message. So we still do manage some bookings that way, less and less so, but there is still that option for people. Yeah. There's another question. How do you package up shows to create a subscription season? We don't have a subscription season as such for the club, but I'm sure that you...
No, we don't, although the facility is there within our booking system, and probably any booking system. We don't have seasons. That we do run the occasional festival, weekend festival, and we can produce weekend passes to the festival without too many problems in the system. We haven't done any season things. Might have to think about doing that, but to date we haven't done that. But I know that the system is quite capable of generating that sort of information.
And we do run our memberships through Sabo as well, so all of the membership payments go through the Sabo system too. So it is reasonably flexible. There's another question here, this will be for you. How often do you review which ticketing system you use?
Okay. We initially, when we started, had to sign up for a 3-year period. So we reviewed it after that 3-year period, and quite extensively, having had that 3 years experience, looked at a number of other systems in comparison, and there were more systems available then. But in the end, we came back to using the same system as we were used to it, and there wasn't any others at the time that offered anything. And I think we then had to sign up for another, I think it was a 2-year period. So we probably would review what we're doing every 2 years. Yeah.
Okay. Bronwyn, oh, sorry. The previous question is, sorry, your response was breaking up on my computer and I missed it. Read people without internet access. Yeah, so just to repeat that one, we still have the facility for people to be able to call up during the club office hours, or to call into the club in person and do their bookings that way. So we do still have the facility to answer phone calls or get back to people if they leave us messages. So that's how we handle it, basically the old way that we used to handle it for those people. I hope that answers that question. Another question, we've been using Try Booking. Do you have an experience of this? I actually have experience of using Try Booking, and the event that I was doing was a much smaller very flexible event. So it was very easy to set up with try booking just the event, how many people there were, and then kind of go right ahead. I don't think try booking was a good fit for the Brisbane Jazz Club because we have a seating arrangement, and Sabo always, I think, continues to feel like the better fit.
At the time we first went in and used the Sabo system, I seem to remember we did look at try bookings, but at the time they weren't flexible enough and didn't have seating plans and so forth. Although I think that has probably now changed, and they probably offer a totally different, more advanced system now than they did. And I know they do seating plans now, which they didn't when we first looked at what we were doing.
How did you market your ticketing system outside of your membership base? Well, we didn't really have to market the ticketing system as such. I think it was more a case of once we had the capacity for people to book online, we attracted a different demographic. So it was almost the other way around. It was actually delivering a system to a demographic that wanted it, to kind of fit that need. So I guess the people we had to more kind of convince that it was a good idea was maybe the existing membership who weren't so used to kind of booking online. But once we had that capacity to book online available, it actually gave us, I think you'd agree, it kind of gave us a different demographic.
It certainly helped change that, and as you say, that the younger demographic were a lot more used to using online systems than perhaps some of our older members were. But the older members, and there still are older members, they are now quite used to the system and quite happy with it.
So just at the moment, in your marketing materials, are you sort of saying book online or phone? Is that how it?
We tend to err on the side of preferring people to book online. So we don't push the availability of people being able to phone. And indeed, we do make a charge for people that book by phone, as it does take up quite a bit of office time every time someone rings in to book. So we some time ago introduced a bigger booking fee for people doing it by telephone, to cover the cost of that and to dissuade people from using it. And quite often people will ring in to make a booking, and if they're told they can do it online and it won't cost them the same, they will quite quickly go and do it online quite happily.
And that ability to free up that staff time was, as I said, like that was one of the major reasons that we decided to go for that online ticketing. With a small volunteer organisation, the more time you can kind of free up to do the things that are really important, like, marketing the shows, making sure that membership is happy, that everything's running smoothly, the better. And it was a fairly easy choice in the end, I think.
It was.
Can you easily access your patron data after events? Does this cost extra? I might let you talk to that one.
The answer to that is yes. You can very easily access patron data during or after the event. The system gives all sorts of reports in all sorts of formats, so that it's very easy to get at that information. And it's information that we do use. We print it out each night, the number of people coming and where they're sitting, and we use that information is directly, or the financial side of it is directly transferred to our bookkeeper, who has access to the system. So getting patron data and information is very easy indeed.
And it doesn't cost any extra.
And it does not cost any extra.
It's just all part of the system.
Can I just ask a question? Do you use your booking numbers, do you sort of track them in the lead up to a performance and use them to guide any last minute, this show's not doing so well, let's really give it a strong marketing
Absolutely,
push.
we do. That very much is so. We use that for a number of things, not only for pushing the event, but just for letting our catering staff know how many people to expect on a night and so forth. But yes, very much it's tracked, and then if a particular event looks like it's not attracting a lot of people, our people will start pushing it a bit more online. And we'll also contact the particular artists, because that makes a big difference whether they themselves are promoting their own thing, and sometimes they don't bother and they're told that the ticket sales aren't so good and suddenly they do, and it makes quite a big difference. So yeah, tracking it is very important.
Did you update your web presence in any way at the same time as moving to online ticketing, or did you just merge it into your existing site? It was a bit of both, actually, to be honest, because you know, at that time lots of things were changing. The Brisbane Jazz Club didn't actually even have a proper website, I think, until maybe mid 2002 or 3 or something. So we had a few website upgrades that kind of coincided with Sabo. But actually, Sabo has been with us through at least 2 website upgrades. So I don't think we necessarily updated our web presence in direct relationship to Sabo at all. It was in terms of the website presence, we've still probably presented the events in the same way that we had at the time. We just added in the capacity to book online onto those events. So and then yes, Sabo then just merged with us as the websites got upgraded.